Emma sat by her window questioning whether she was making the right choice. Could she really walk away from her parents? Could she really separate herself from the people who had raised her? The guilt weighed heavily on her chest, a constant reminder of the decision she had made. But deep down, she knew it was the only way forward. Emma had grown up in a house where love was conditional. Her parents, though outwardly caring, were deeply manipulative and emotionally neglectful. Her mother, a perfectionist, had always set impossibly high standards for Emma. No matter how hard she tried, nothing was ever good enough. Her mother's praise was rare, but when it did come, it felt more like a transaction, something Emma had to earn through constant achievement. If Emma got a perfect grade on a test, her mother would say, "That's what I expect from you. Now, can you do even better next time?" The message was clear. Love was not something freely given. It had to be earned. Her father was distant, never really involved in her life, but when he did speak, his words were cutting and dismissive. Growing up, Emma believed that this was normal, that every family was like this. She tried to please them, to be the daughter they wanted her to be, even if it meant losing herself in the process. As she got older, though, the cracks in her family's facade became harder to ignore. Her emotional needs were constantly dismissed, and any attempt to assert herself or express her feelings was met with hostility or indifference. One particular incident stood out in her mind. She was about 16 when she finally worked up the courage to tell her parents that she was struggling with depression. She'd been feeling empty, disconnected, and hopeless for months, but admitting it to them felt like a monumental step. Her mother had looked at her coldly and said, "Everyone feels that way sometimes. You're just being dramatic. You should be grateful for everything we've done for you." Her father, as usual, had said nothing, choosing to retreat into the silence that always seemed to follow these difficult conversations. Emma felt the familiar pang of rejection, the sinking realization that no one would truly understand her. But over time, the strain began to take its toll. Emma moved away for college, and while the distance was physical, it wasn't enough to escape the hold her parents had over her. Their expectations were still there, always lurking in the background. Her mother would call, demanding updates on every aspect of Emma's life, questioning her choices and offering unsolicited advice. Her father rarely contacted her, but when he did, it was with criticisms masked as concern. "You should be doing better," he would say. "I don't know why you're struggling so much. You had everything handed to you." The emotional manipulation never stopped. Even from miles away, they found ways to make Emma feel guilty for living her own life. Every time they called, she was reminded that their love for her was a prize she had to earn, and it came with strings attached. If Emma didn't comply with their wishes, there was always the threat of withdrawal, whether it was an icy silence or cutting remarks that made her feel small and unworthy. But something inside Emma shifted one night. She had just gotten off the phone with her mother, who had gone on another tirade about how Emma was wasting her potential. She felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. The old feelings of inadequacy crept in, but this time Emma didn't push them aside. For the first time in her life, she let herself feel the full weight of the situation. She realized that she had spent years sacrificing her own happiness, her own well-being, just to try to live up to their expectations. The pain of trying to please them had become unbearable. That night, she made a decision. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. She knew she had to create distance from them, emotionally, if not physically. She couldn't keep sacrificing herself for people who didn't see her for who she truly was. Emma spent the next few days processing everything. The guilt gnawed at her, pulling her in different directions. She had been conditioned to believe that family came first, no matter what. But she also knew that she could no longer keep sacrificing her own peace for the sake of their approval. It was during this time that Emma started to really understand what it meant to have a toxic parent. Toxic parents don't always abuse their children in overt, obvious ways. Sometimes, it's the subtle ways they make you question your worth, the constant demands they place on you, and the emotional manipulation that makes you doubt your own reality. They might not even realize they're doing it, but the effects are real, and they run deep. One of the hardest things Emma had to face was the fear of being judged by others. She worried that her extended family would think she was ungrateful or disrespectful. She feared that people would say she was cutting off her parents for no reason when, in reality, they had never truly given her the love and support she needed. But the more Emma thought about it, the more she realized that her happiness couldn't depend on other people's perceptions. She had to prioritize her own well-being. The next time her mother called, Emma knew it was time to set a boundary. Her mother had already started with the usual criticism, probing into Emma's life as though she had a right to know everything. But this time, Emma didn't fold. She calmly but firmly said, "Mom, I need to take a break from these conversations for a while. I love you, but I can't continue to engage in this way. It's affecting my mental health." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, followed by a cold, "Fine, if that's what you want." Emma hung up the phone, her heart racing. It felt like a betrayal, even though she knew it was necessary. The silence that followed was deafening. For days, she didn't hear from her mother. There was no angry phone call, no desperate pleas for her to come back. Just silence. It was in that silence that Emma began to realize something profound. She had always been the one holding the relationship together. She had always been the one trying to prove herself, to make her parents proud. But they had never truly given her the love she needed in return. As the weeks went by, Emma felt a strange sense of peace beginning to settle in. She had expected to feel empty or lonely without her parents. But instead, she felt a sense of freedom. For the first time in her life, she was no longer defined by their expectations or criticism. She started to explore who she was outside of their influence, what her passions were, what she truly wanted out of life, and what it meant to love herself. Months passed, and Emma's decision to separate from her parents didn't make the relationship magically better. Her mother would occasionally reach out with passive-aggressive messages, and her father remained silent. But Emma had found strength in her decision. She had learned that love, real love, isn't conditional. It's not about earning affection through constant performance or living up to someone else's standards. It's about respect, care, and mutual support. Ultimately, Emma didn't walk away from her parents because she hated them. She walked away because she realized that she couldn't grow, heal, or truly be herself while constantly battling their emotional manipulation. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one for her. And as she sat by her window that evening, watching the sky change colors, she finally felt a sense of peace, knowing that she was free to live her life on her own terms. If you have toxic parents, please leave a comment and share your experience if you feel comfortable doing so.